today's broadcast, which I'm so excited to chat with you about. Can you please tell us your name, what your business name is, and how did you get into this business anyway?
For sure. So my name is Shannon Hickey, and I'd just like to share a little bit about my background before I go into my business. Is my mom is First Nations and Welsh from a community in BC, and my father, my birth father is Japanese Canadian, and he was born just during or right after the war, World War II, and then instead of going into an internment camp, they went back to Japan, and then he was raised there until he was 5, and then came back to Canada. So my grandma took 4 little kids under the age of 5 across the Pacific Ocean on a boat. And I can't even imagine leaving everything here. And so it's just really fascinating. And I just wanted to share a little bit about my background and where my family comes from. And I also have my father who raised me, who is First Nations and French. So yeah, and I think growing up, my parents didn't have a lot of money, worked in the orchards, and and then my father got a job and worked for like more than 30 years at Tolco at a mill. So just a very job where he worked his way up to raise a family, and then they ended up going through a divorce in my teens, and things were a little hard, and we ended up having to live in low-income housing. So I found financial security was really important to me at a young age because I didn't really have anyone to lean on. And I think, you see this world that's going on around you, and you imagine what are other people doing out there with money, that have a house, that have, nice clothes and cars and have opportunities to travel. So I felt like, I wanted to get a job. So I had a paper route at the age of 12. I worked at McDonald's at the age of 15, and I was always like saving and then learning how to invest on my own. So, and I think when I got into post-secondary, I realized that, oh, well, I can actually help people invest too. So I ended up doing my degree in business, and then I did my Canadian securities course, which is what you need to get your license to sell investment products on the stock market to the public. So I did that at like the age of 22 and finished my business degree. And I remember I was 22 and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't go and work for an investment firm and tell people how to invest their money. I'm like, I'm too young to do this. So I ended up going to Japan and working there and saving a ton of money because I worked all the time from morning till night, a couple of jobs, and traveled the world. And then I ended up coming back at 25 and worked in the investment industry and worked my way up. And I became a wealth advisor. And the fascinating part is that I was usually the only woman there amongst a number of, middle-aged white men. So it was kind of a lonely journey for 10 years. And, the other women that were in the office were admin staff. And so sometimes it wasn't the most supportive environment when I was younger. And I was an advisor, but way younger than them and needing their help to get things done. So there was a couple of times I had to sit down and talk to women and tell them, I need your help. Like, this is a job and we need to do this for the clients and get it done. You may not like me or, and stuff like that. So it's interesting talking about this topic because I wanted to help people invest. But more in particular is I wanted to help women learn about finances and create that financial independence for themselves and not be dependent on anyone. Be dependent on a partner or be dependent on an employer. I wanted them to have that, those funds set aside, that security, and so anyway, I ended up realizing a lot of my clients were older white men with $1 million in their portfolio, and I didn't have women in my client list. And I'm like, what's going on here? And I wasn't happy. I was working a lot of hours and I'm like in this corporate grind I found. And I thought, if I'm going to work this many hours, I'm going to do it for myself. So anyway, I decided to take some time. I had my first daughter. I have 2 daughters right now. And anyway, yeah, so I was taking a year, and then I had friends and family coming to ask me for help with their finances. And I realized, oh, I could start my own financial coaching business and charge by the hour. So I offer objective advice. My marketing is geared to women because I find statistically women are the ones that are in poverty, or if they're single parents. And given the investment landscape, is that, 90, what was the stat? 99%, almost 99% of investment firms are owned by white men. And just looking at who I worked with and who people had to sit in front of to learn about money was men, older men. So anyway, I have a coaching business. It's called Dollar Dame. I'm finally getting there. And Dollar Dame is a woman that has authority. And so I thought, I want to teach women to be confident and know what their choices are when it comes to financial decisions that they need to make in life. Because I find investing and insurance are very complicated, a lot of jargon, and you can lose money and you can pay too much in premiums, and helping other people make money rather than keeping more money in your pocket for your life and your goals. So, yeah, so I started Dollar Dame about 8 years ago.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing the background and how you kind of got to this place as well. I think it is really important to share that sort of thing, because stories are so important in our lives, and like it really helps to explain, why this actually matters to you more than just a business. Like this is actually something that is like you've been kind of working towards this place your whole life, yeah. And I think that what you're sharing about not seeing people who look like you in positions of leadership, or being able to work with people who look like you, or to get help and advice from people who look like you, it's really, really important. Like there's all kinds of statistics that talk about representation and how it really matters, and how it can affect us, especially as it relates to our mental health and our well-being and our ideas of what's possible for us. So I just want to say kudos to you, Shannon, for standing up here, woman of color, woman. You've got this massive education, you have all these years of experience, and of course your own practical experience with obviously implementing what you've learned in your own life, to share that information with women who, what I've learned from statistics as well, is that we're typically better investors once we learn what we need to learn. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right. And
Amazing.
and that's the fascinating part, is like, I was 25 in the investment firm, and a lot of times sitting at the boardroom table with these other male investors, made to feel very small, like I didn't belong, that I wasn't smart enough, and I was like afraid to ask questions. And then I realized, I'm like, no, I know just as much or more than a lot of these guys sitting at this table. And that was the thing that took me a long time to figure out, which is sad. And I don't want women to feel like that. I want women to know that they can be just as good at managing their money and investing. And it just needs to be simplified and, made in a way that they can learn and feel comfortable in that learning environment. Because I found once I left that environment, oh my God, I was just like absorbing this, absorbing that, and learning so much quicker when you're feeling like loved and accepted and confident. You know what I mean? So I felt like it was such a struggle, like with, trying to grasp all these different strategies, but also like fighting up against this, doubt around you, or people that, and not everyone in the industry was like that. I worked for two firms. One was not good, one was excellent. And I had a lot of supportive men behind me too, that, would stay and help me with presentations, like, welcoming people in, some of my clients, and, and we worked together, which was great. And some, it wasn't like that at all. It was really hard. So I think the thing is too, is like with women investing, like I have an investing program that I created, and it's teaching people how to invest in ETFs. And a lot of people probably heard this because exchange trade funds have grown in popularity over probably the last 10 years. Mutual funds were the main fund created to help people from the middle class area get into the stock market. And then people started to realize there's this alternative. It's called an exchange traded fund, where people can invest in, that's less expensive, more transparent. And a lot of ads on TV now trying to educate people that there's a lot of hidden fees in mutual funds. So I've created this program. It's very easy to, what would you say, implement and learn. It's a fund where there's many different companies in there that people can buy and start growing their money, and see what they own and know those fees. But I think the thing with the statistic with women is that women who do end up investing usually outperform portfolios of men, because the research has shown that women usually do a bit more research, and they align their investments with what their personal goals are. So, meaning they're not just taking people's advice, on the street or at the golf course or wherever they are, right? They're doing the research and they're saying, okay, is this a good fit for me? And then they invest in it and they're confident in their investment choice. So then they're not doubting themselves and making rash decisions throughout that investment time frame that they set out for themselves, which is really important, right? So I think women need to know that when they do choose to invest and they learn it, that they end up doing a good job. So it's just taking that time to do it.
Totally. It's so important to share that information. I think that um yeah, a lot of women that I talk to anyway have like no idea where to start, and it seems overwhelming and daunting, and there is a lot of jargon and things like that. So I think it's really important to know that, it's just like anything, you've just got to learn it.
Mhm.
Um so when it comes to like money and mental health, I think there's some like pretty obvious conclusions that we could jump to in terms of how one affects the other. But I'd love your perspective on how you see those two correlated, especially with women and female entrepreneurs, and just kind of, yeah, what you've seen in your experience and in terms of how those two topics can be correlated.
Well, mental health. Um, well, I can tell you that with my mental, I do deal with anxiety. So I have to really look after myself in terms of going out for walks, getting fresh air, not drinking too much caffeine or alcohol, and just getting lots of sleep. Uh, so I find with money, I've always personally been very frugal and conservative, and just because I like to have that control and know what's happening, and that's also, so if it's with debt, I don't want any bad debt. I make sure I just live within my means, and and make sure that when I do put stuff on my credit card, it's paid off right away. So I think that's the thing, is like, if you, it can run in many different ways. Like if you're not making enough, you're always concerned about your future. Where am I going to get this money to pay for things like the roof over my head, having food, paying the bills? And then there could be another side on the mental health aspect of, maybe living beyond your means and having so much debt that, it's really wearing on you. And I think that's the thing, is if there's female entrepreneurs out there, I personally believe that if you want to be successful and be ultimately the top creative person that you can be, you've got to have your stuff together, like your personal financial stuff together, because it's going to wear on you and you're not going to have that brain capacity to be creative and really be out there in a way that's authentic and real and unique. So I think, looking after your finances, and if there's a point in time, or when that point is, if you have that wealth built up and you want to grow it for yourself for security, either for retirement and starting a business or putting it back in your business, is learning about what options are out there to make sure your money's growing for you, and taking the appropriate risk for your goals, and understanding what the worst case scenario is and the best case scenario is when you get into investments, because investments usually are not guaranteed. So you need to know that, and you don't need to have that extra stress while you're trying to be creative and offering the world something of value, and that everything is going well.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
absolutely. And you know what I just thought of when I was listening to you talk as well, is our research shows that the wage gap actually goes up when you get into self-employment. So in Canada anyway, the wage gap is like 72 cents on the dollar. So if you have a job and you're working doing the exact same work as a male counterpart, you're going to get paid 72 cents on the dollar for what he gets paid. And that's just a function of living in, a system where, we used to be property and weren't able to vote. So a lot of women go into business for themselves to, increase their ability to earn, to increase their freedom control. We know these things. But what I didn't know is that the wage gap actually drops in North America to 58%. So the earnings are way, way less. So when you're talking about being worried about, putting a roof over your head and feeding, yourself and possibly children and things like that and paying your bills and whatnot, it becomes even that much more difficult. And I think I love what you said about detaching your financial security from your employer and even being able to detach it from your business. So if you have investments and you have, a home or something, like if you know how to manage your money financially, then you can make the money that you are earning like actually work for you and give you more peace of mind. Um, yeah, and that was a completely surprising stat to me too. I thought that self-employed women were earning more, but I think, we do have a tendency to be a little bit more nervous and maybe not think that we know as much as we know, or these types of things. I see it all the time with other female entrepreneurs. Just, knowing our worth and asking for money and things like that can be difficult. And sometimes when we do that, we're not received very well. So yeah, the struggle is real.
Exactly. Yeah, good point, Laurel. Good point. So I wanted to talk about that too, because I found when I was in the investment industry in my younger days, I was making a crazy amount of money. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Bought a Mercedes and I was buying real estate and making money. And I'm like, okay. And then when I realized when I went fully on my own, it was like hard, in my first year, like they want me to bring in $10 million in assets a year. So if I have to bring in $10 million in assets a year, every year, well, my clients better have $1 million in their account or else I'm going to be spread too thin. And I thought, oh, I just want to, have a comfortable life. I don't want to be too greedy and have too much to manage. I just want to, maybe get to 30, 50 million and be comfortable. But talking to some of the older guys, they're like, Shannon, they're not going to let off at you. They're going to want you to bring in 10 million a year for a long time, and I was like, that's crazy. Can I do this until I retire? I'm like, I don't think so. So I think that's when I really opened my eyes. It's like, is it worth being employed by this big corporate investment firm to make a ton of money and be miserable? Or do I want to take a pay cut and work for myself? So what did I do? I sold my Mercedes, I sold my apartment, I lived in a basement suite, and I put all my money away and I said, I'm just going to do this on my own. And the funny thing is, I'm reading this book called Status Anxiety, and philosophers debated this thing, like with communism, capitalism. And there's this one philosopher that talked about this way back in the early 1900s about, not being a slave to the corporate world and buying 3 acres out in the middle of nowhere and building your house and doing this. So not that I knew about this, but I just knew that if I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to be successful, I need to have this peace of mind that I can look after myself no matter what. So I had my money invested. I decided I was going to buy some property, build a small house, and rent it out. So if worst case scenario happens and it doesn't work out for me in my entrepreneurial career, then I can go live there and work at McDonald's. So I was like, that was the thing, to be able to take that risk, And I think the thing is I think a lot of women are realizing, do they want to work and make that 72 cents, to the dollar? Or do they want to take that cut and have flexibility and make that, close to 60 cents? And that's the thing is I would rather have more time, flexibility, creativity in my business. And as long as I lived within, my means and simply, that if I had that time to make it successful, I would have the time and be able to do it.
Love it. Yeah. And studies show too that women measure success differently. Like it's a gendered thing where some people might consider success is, the Mercedes and the 6-figure income. A lot of women just, like want to be able to do something that doesn't suck and have like a pretty office and be able to pick up their kids from school and make ends meet and buy cute shoes every once in a while. And not to trivialize it, but just our priorities tend to be a little bit different. Being accessible to family, those types of things. So you mentioned that you have a investment course, and I was just wondering about like what you've seen around sort of like women investing and what kind of like the good outcomes are and what some of the bad outcomes are, and just kind of like what you've seen, and partially like one of the reasons that you created the course was to like solve the bad outcomes, right? So I want to hear the tea on that.
I hear the details. Hey,
Yeah.
very interesting question, Laurel, because this really, really upset me when I worked in the industry. And that was the thing, is like, I need to educate people, and I need to have a platform where it's objective. So people don't think I'm trying to sell them something, so people can just come to me and I tell them, these are the pros, these are the cons. This is how you protect yourself. So what I did see in the industry is, for example, so this is one of my students, won't say any names, but she was very upset. The person she was getting advice from said, the markets are really hot right now. I think it's good that we put more money in, especially if you need to retire because you're behind the 8 ball. So what she did was she ended up taking out a loan, tens of thousands of dollars to invest in the stock market at the top of the market before 2008, 2009 crisis.
Oh no.
She came to me and she was so upset, and she's like, I can't believe this. I just sold everything at, and had to pay this loan back. So not only did she, have to pay all that money back, but she even like lost more. So it was like more that she had to pay back. So anyway, those are stories I hear. So people borrowing to invest when they can't afford it, and investing all of it at the top of the market. Number two is, so this is a thing in the investment industry. You have people that really do invest and manage portfolios really well, and you have salespeople. And so I think the biggest thing is teaching people how to interview a good advisor that's going to be transparent, that's going to be moderate and educate them on the risks involved. And are they up for that? Because you can take on a lot of risk, or you can take on very little risk, or be in between. And what I saw was one couple that I was working with, and I always told my clients when I went fully on my own that I don't want to be risky. I'm moderate, to conservative. And that's what I did. And then anyway, I did so well for these clients. And this was 2008, 2009 crisis. And they, I was like, come on, like, this is amazing, right? And they were like, thank you. They ended up leaving me and went to someone else. And then a year later, they came back because they lost a ton of money with the new person.
Oh my
And
goodness.
they were like, Shannon, we're so sorry we left you. Will you take us back? And they told me what happened. And the person put them in a lot of risky things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, in the investment industry, sometimes you can sell products that pay out a huge commission. And some people don't know that. And so these people that were retired had a huge cut in what their wealth was. So that's another story. There's some people that, will say, oh, this is, I don't know if I should say, I had a mentor in the business, but I ended up working with, and I ended up leaving, because once I realized and became wiser after building up my confidence and knowledge, is that what was happening was not in alignment with my risk and how my investment philosophy was turning out to be.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, is that in the industry, there are so many products, so many strategies that advisors will tell themselves things, and they believe it, and that's what they will promote and teach other people. So hopefully I didn't go on a tangent, but those are some of the things that I've seen. And what I do in my course is I put all the basics of what I've learned in the textbook. This is one thing. I followed everything in the textbook, and then I realized, I want to take on more risk. And this was in my 20s, in my personal portfolio. So I did all these other things. And then I realized, I was like, well, no, actually the slow, moderate approach is best. You can take on risk if you want to have some fun. But I tell people, make sure it's what you can afford.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 5%, 10% of your portfolio, but don't do it with your whole portfolio.
Yeah.
So the slow, boring approach with exchange traded funds is the sure way, and so,
I'm
oh,
excited to like ask you to share what I've heard you say about ETFs to our audience. So um there was like a contest with Warren Buffett, if I recall.
mhm.
Can you share about that?
Yeah,
Also?
and that's really interesting, especially with what has happened in the news with the hedge funds
Mhm.
on Wall Street and the what was it Reddit community of these small time investors.
Yeah.
So what was it? I think maybe 15 years ago, Warren Buffett, who is a value investor, long time. I think he's like in his 80s now, but he's done very well for himself because he's a moderate investor who chooses things based on what they represent in what people need and use. And he thinks that exchange traded funds, if someone doesn't have that investing knowledge of all these products and strategies out there, he thinks the best way for someone to move forward in the growth of their wealth is using a very passive exchange traded fund. And passive means where you don't go in and trade anything. You just buy this one ETF, which is an index of all the 500 companies that have a huge global presence, and it's called the S&P 500. So like Apple's in there. What else? Tesla's in there now. And that if you hold that over 10 years, that you will outperform any hedge fund. So hedge funds, for people that don't understand hedge funds are funds that are available only to very ultra wealthy people. You have to have like, you know, a million or something in income every year and so much in assets. So for me, that's just, we shouldn't have that at all because it's not accessible to everyone. But the thing is that hedge funds will hire these managers that manage it and choose all these different companies, different types of investments to try and outperform the index. So say the stock market or S&P 500. But Warren Buffett says, yeah, you can try and outperform the market over time, but you only usually do it for 1 year, maybe two, but you can't do it consistently
Yeah.
over every year for 10 years. So anyway, Warren Buffett ended up winning this bet with this huge hedge fund on Wall Street. And it just proved the point that passively not trying to outsmart the market or hiring and paying all these fees to some manager for him to try and outperform the market, because in the research and the data, it shows that they can do it consistently. They can do it maybe for 1 year, and then after that, it's not going to happen. So it's interesting because I've read more about that. And Warren Buffett, as he's getting old and he has his second wife, he's actually told his wife, if anything happens to me, just buy an ETF of the S&P 500 and hold that. Yeah.
And so your course is about how to do that exact thing, right?
Mhm.
Okay. You
So
wanna
my
tell us about it?
course is 9 modules, and I've made videos and handouts, and I do weekly group calls with people. And it's funny because I market my business to women, but men do take my courses too and come to me for meetings. And it's interesting because I think they feel uncomfortable. They're like, can I join too? And I'm like, of course, it's open to everyone. So I teach people how to use and invest in exchange traded funds that are passive, and choosing investments and making their portfolio, um, what would you say, in a way that's appropriate for their goals, their timeline, and their risk tolerance. And understanding what the volatility is when they do invest in what they choose with their ETFs. So it's 9 weeks long. And I actually have a master class that I have created, and it's going to be offered next week. There's 3 times next week that it's going to be offered, and it teaches people a few of the strategies to lower risk when they invest. Um, and you inspired me, Laurel, by uh, talking of getting me to think about like anxiety and money. And I realized that I think a lot of times women don't invest is because they feel like they don't have control,
Mhm.
right? And so if my mission in my business is to help women invest and grow their money rather than keep it in very conservative investments that maybe are just staying with inflation or not, and they're losing that mm, that purchasing power, like I needed to really think about how they can understand how they can do as much as they can to lower that risk
Mhm.
in within their control. So this free masterclass is talking about a couple strategies that women can implement and have that exposure to some potential growth in the stock market, but while understanding the risk and trying to minimize it as much as possible.
Perfect.
So yeah, so my free masterclass is on my website at dollardame.ca. So if you sign up, there's 3 time slots for next week, and then I will be launching my full 9 module, which probably runs about 2 months investing program for women. I was thinking about launching a smaller investing program for people that may not have as much time or money, but I thought I don't feel comfortable doing that. I need to give everything to people when they want to learn how to invest and not try and make it too simple.
Yeah.
But it's going to be simple. It's going to be um, me breaking everything down and there every week, answering questions and helping people learn how to do it. Because I find the investment industry makes it difficult because they want you to rely on them, depend on them, and get those fees so they can drive the Mercedes and have their big mansions and yachts.
So you mentioned enough time and enough money. So how much time and money should a person have to dedicate to this if they were thinking about investing? Because I think there's a misconception that you need to have like
Mm.
a lot of cash, right, to even think about investing when, it might be like just as much of an option as, a savings account or like an RSP or a GIC or some of the tax-free savings accounts, some of the terms that like most people are relatively familiar with. So can you break that down for us?
Sure. So I'm realizing that you may have an audience that is global.
Mhm.
So I am based in Canada. When I talk about the stock market, it is applicable to all stock markets. But when I talk about opening up accounts, depending on what your country, where you're from and what country, there will be different types of accounts to open up
Yeah.
to buy the investments.
Yeah.
So in Canada, there's a trading platform called Quest Trade, and the reason why I'm talking about it is because I personally use it, but there's many other different investment platforms in Canada and in other countries that you would have to do your research on. But with Quest Trade in particular, you just need $1,000
Yeah.
to put into the account, and then with that $1,000, once it's in the account, to start like looking at exchange trade funds or stocks, whatever it is that you're deciding to invest in, you can buy as little as 1 or 2 shares and diversify. Uh, but yeah, $1,000 to put in the account. So it's not a lot.
Mm.
And what I tell a lot of my students is that if you don't have that money right now, then start putting it away in a high rate savings account
Mhm.
or a guaranteed investment certificate. In some countries, it's called a term deposit, where you get a little bit of growth on it while you're getting to that $1,000 mark.
Yeah.
And it may be less or a bit more depending on what investment, like online trading platform you use within your
Mhm.
country. But Quest Trade is one. And it's interesting because I met a woman on an island out in the Pacific and I was on my way to Australia and she wanted to learn how to invest. And she's like, I don't know where to go. And I'm like, and it's this beautiful island of Fiji. And I'm like, okay. So anyway, I did some research for her, and I found out that Quest Trade actually can open up accounts in many different countries. You just have to make sure that you can supply your ID and prove that it's you who's doing the trading.
Yeah.
Because there's all these rules. So yeah, there's ways to invest anywhere where you're located. So
Perfect. That's great. Okay, so $1,000, and then in terms of the time, how much time should a person set aside if they're thinking about taking this course? Or yeah, how long does it take?
well, it's the videos are probably about 30 minutes to an hour every week. So that's weeks. And then we have a 30-minute group call. So I would say, and as homeworks, I'd say about an hour to 2 hours a week,
That's not bad.
9 weeks.
Yeah.
And if it's too fast in the pace, you have a lifetime access to the program, the videos, and there will be group calls again in the future with other program launches so that you'll have access to.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so go to dollardame.com if to sign up for the masterclass and to learn more about the course, right?
.ca.
.ca. Sorry, dollardame.ca. Canadian company, Canadian women here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. Is there anything else that you'd want our audience to know before we sign off today?
Yes, I do. How much time do we have? We have
Good time.
7 minutes. Okay.
Mhm.
So one thing that I wanted to talk about so I know you know Laurel, but your audience doesn't. I was down in Australia for 2 years, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to the accelerator program down there. Ended up really building relationships with female founders, and the government was doing a lot of research, like they are in North America and Canada now, with the fascinating data that is coming from how successful startups are if they are co-founded by females
Mhm.
or if they are solely founded by females. And this is what I want female entrepreneurs to know and not to give up. Because if it's a business that you are running and you love and you're having a hard time, with that steady income, they are showing that women are their returns are 10% higher than men that are starting up these companies. Yeah, it's like fascinating over a longer time frame.
Yeah.
So again, it's very similar to the investing part. It's like
Yeah.
running into starting up and running your own business
Yeah.
over 5 years.
Yeah.
These women are being super successful and their return on investment is 10% higher.
Amazing.
So this is a thing. And I think too, to help women have that confidence is that on a consumer level, we are making 85% of the purchases out there. And companies need to learn to market to us. But what the sad thing is that investors and the investment funds are managed and owned by 99% of the men.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's big.
this research is starting to be done in countries because I think they're realizing, well, women are not just the consumers, but they are really starting up these businesses fast and they're successful at it long term and more successful on a return basis.
Yeah.
And they're now creating these female founded funds where it's like, okay, this money's here to invest and back these female owned companies.
Yeah.
So, yes, get out there, pitch your business, and don't be afraid to pitch it how you want to pitch it. Like, we've come a long way with where we're at as women, but still have a long way to go. But
Mhm.
the thing is that talking to some of these women down in Australia that own businesses, they're tired of hearing these angel investors talk about the hockey stick curve,
Mhm.
where if we invest in you, we want you to do this, this, and that to get your growth up to this level. It's like so many of them say, well, you know what, my values in my company, I want to do it my way and
Mhm.
have a slower growth rate so that we do it in a quality, ethical way.
And not just the quality ethical way, but like founders burn out fast. Women burn out way faster. We're more overwhelmed. And so to, assert that we want our businesses to grow in a much more sustainable way, I think is like absolutely reasonable. But it doesn't fit in that little box of like what, like the status quo for investment looks like.
Exactly. And that's why women are going to start changing that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
I love that correlation between being self-employed and starting your own business and investing because it really is the same sort of thing where you're like taking a massive financial risk and betting on yourself really and just betting on your own skills and your education and your community and things like that to make sure that you pop up and you succeed in things. So I think you're totally right, and the statistics obviously show it as well. Like we have the ability to be successful on our own terms and surpass our male counterparts. um, it's fantastic to hear. Thank you for those stats. It's amazing.
Yeah, we're slower, but
Yeah.
we're slower for a reason,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're thoughtful and yeah, we're taking our time to make sure it's done right. But don't overthink it, ladies. You got to
Yeah.
still get out there and
You still got to do it. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And that's that fine line between. So when you're talking about that, like return, so that I would love to know like data on that contest between Warren Buffett and the hedge fund guys. So the hedge fund, do you remember how much they grew their investment portfolio by versus what the
Hmm, I don't remember the exact numbers.
yeah, I don't either. I remember that it was significant though, like over 10 years that the ETF did perform like significantly better. It wasn't just like a wee bit. It was quite obvious that he won, like won one, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
exactly. So I can pull the information out and I can post it to you or
Cool. That's great. Yeah. And then I can share it.
yeah,
Amazing.
definitely.
Thanks so much, Shannon.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great having you on here today. And for any ladies watching, definitely head over to dollardame.ca, sign up for those free masterclasses. As you can tell, Shannon's a wealth of information and she's got tons of great valuable tips for you. And just stay tuned for that course coming up because it's 9 modules. You only need $1,000 and a couple hours a week, and you can be well on your way to investing and creating better returns for yourself and your family and your business.
That's right. Thank you,
Um,
Laurel. Take
Thank
care, everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.